Okay, so once again, welcome to IBA 614 Global Marketing. This is our second session. And in today's session, we will be treating the topic, the global marketing environment. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. And these include, one, to be able to define regional economic integration and identify the different levels of integration. I believe in our previous session, we were introduced to a bit of regional integration and how it is changing the field of global marketing. So today we will delve deeper into the concept of regional economic integration and look at the different levels of integration that exist and how they can affect global marketing activity. We will also be able to discuss the implications associated with regional economic integration for marketers, because these various forms of integration that are taking place introduce new opportunities and threats with regard to marketing across boundaries. So we will try to look into how this will influence global marketing activity. We will also look a bit closely at political and legal issues in the global marketing environment and its implications for marketers who are marketing across borders. We will also do the same for the sociocultural environment and also try to dissect its implications for global marketing activity. So these are the four main learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. And with that, we will begin today's session, starting with the economic environment. Now, why must we be cognizant of the economic environment as global marketers? You will all bear with me that economic development differs across the world depending on the country that you are looking at and the various indices that you are considering. So when it comes to economic development, we can mainly look at it from the perspective of one of three types of economic activity, or a combination of these, including one, primary activity, which has to do with all the activities concerned with agriculture and extractive processes, like farming and the mining of the various minerals, including coal, iron, gold, and then fishing as well. All of these constitute primary activities. And then we can also talk about secondary activity, which involves manufacturing activities that process the output from the primary activities into a certain form of finished product for consumption by consumers in different contexts. And then we can also talk about tertiary activities, which are usually based upon the provision of services. And here we can talk about various forms of service provision, including tourism, healthcare, insurance, among others. Mensa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doc. I just wanted to make a humble submission.
Yes,
on your
please.
Zoom settings, you can disable notification when somebody enters or exits the class. Because because of the rate at which people are doing it, it's kind of taking my mind off the economic environment.
Oh, please, could you guide me for a moment? All right, so like I was saying, these three types of economic activity are basically the foundations of economic growth and development when we are looking at how countries grow their economy. Now, when we consider the economic environment, like I said earlier, because of the different rates of economic development in different countries, economic development is considered as a major determinant of the potential of that particular market in these countries and the level of opportunity for marketers and organizations within these countries. So when it comes to global marketing, it is very important for firms and organizations to look at the economic environment within the markets that they want to enter into, right? Because depending on the level of economic development in that market, the consumers in that market will have a certain degree of purchasing power, which will determine their approach towards the consumption of specific kinds of products and services. Likewise, the level of economic growth and development will also determine how well a firm or organization will do in these markets. So it is fair to say that the economic environment is one of the significant determinants of whether or not a firm will succeed in its global marketing endeavors. And therefore, firms must take cognizance of this environment and the various changes that occur within it, depending on the context that they are considering. Now, when it comes to the measurement of the level of economic development in a particular context or country, the most broadcast measure that most of the international organizations and bodies use to determine economic development is what we refer to as the gross national product, or the GNP. And this is based on national income. So when we talk about GNP, what do we mean? GNP is basically the value of all the goods and services produced by a country during a one-year period, right? And this includes the income that is generated by all the people in the country from the domestic production of various items, as well as the domestic products and services that are exchanged, in addition to all the international activities and exchanges that are performed all within this one-year period, right? So these domestic activities, right, in the form of goods and services that are exchanged, the totality of this that is done within 1 year is referred to as the gross domestic product. And the gross domestic product, together with the income that the country generates from all its international activities, including exports and imports and the international operations of the nation's companies, together come together to give us the gross national product. So when we are looking at economic development, we usually look at the performance of countries in terms of how much of this GNP can be attributed to individual members of the population. Hence, the concept of the gross national product per capita, right? So per capita means per person. So a nation's GNP per capita is simply the GDP per capita, right? Plus the income generated from all the exports, imports, and international operations of the nation's companies per capita. And these two together constitute the GNP per capita. So if you are looking at GNP per capita, you take the entire gross national product, being both domestic income and foreign income, and put it together and divide it by the population. And then if you are looking specifically at the domestic income, you are considering GDP. And if you want to know this per capita, you just take the GDP and you divide it by the population. So by doing GNP per capita, we get to know the nation's income from both foreign and domestic operations per person in the country. And then GDP per capita will give us the nation's domestic output in a year per person in the country when we divide it by the total population. So looking at economic development, the GNP or GDP per capita is one of the base indices that we use to be able to determine the level of economic development in a country. Now, GNP is sometimes referred to as gross national income, because like we said, the GNP is about all the income that is generated from domestic exchange of products and services, as well as international exchanges of products and services. So, like I said, this is one of the base indices that is used to determine economic development. Now, depending on the organization you are dealing with, if it is the IMF or the World Bank or the United Nations, they have their own permutations of different indices that they use to determine the level of economic development in a particular country in different parts of the world. So, for instance, the basic indices for determining the level of development in a country, which leads to the categorization of developed, developing, and least developed countries, is this index that is used by the United Nations, right? So the main index that they use here, as we can see from the extreme left, is the GNI per capita, or the GNP per capita, which I just explained to you. And then they also use an index known as the Human Assets Index, right? Which considers two main indices, including the Health Index and the Education Index. And here you can see the breakdown of what goes into the health index as well as the education index. And then they also go on to use what they refer to as the economic and environmental vulnerability index, which can be broken down into economic vulnerability index and environmental vulnerability index, all of which have sub-dimensions. So the UN uses a combination of these to be able to determine the level of development at which a country is, whether the country is a least developed country or a developing country or a developed country, right? And like I mentioned, depending on the organization you are dealing with, the indices and the permutations that are used will be slightly different. So for now, we are using the United Nations classification, right, for the level of economic development in various countries. Now, they classify the level of economic development in different countries using three main levels, namely the developed economies, the economies in transition, and then the developing economies. Now, when we talk about developed economies, they refer to regions or countries with a high level of economic activity that is characterized by high GDP per capita, which I just explained to you, as well as high levels of industrialization. So they have a huge manufacturing sector with a lot of activity going on in the manufacturing sector in terms of converting a lot of the output from the primary activities into secondary products and services for consumption. They also have highly developed infrastructure, right? As well as high levels of technological advancement. And by the definition alone, we can put a lot of countries in this category, right? So what are some of the countries we can put in this category of developed economy without even knowing what the United Nations classifications has done? What countries can we categorize as developed?
Ghana.
Whoever said that, you have your answer. The laughter says it all.
No, don't worry, it's me. Your master said it.
You were testing the one you said. Okay, so developed economies. Priscilla says USA. Yes, the USA is one. We can put Dubai somewhere there as well. Any others? There's so many of them. Japan, Germany, yes. Right, so these are all examples of developed economies. Then we can also, okay, Marianne says China, perhaps. The Netherlands, yes. Rexford, you're right. So these are all examples of developed economies. Now, next we can talk about economies in transition, right? And these are economies that are changing from a centrally planned economy into a market economy, right? So here we see examples of these all around us, including those countries that were hitherto very socially controlled, or as we refer to them, the communist economies that are now trying to slowly transition into the market economy and be more market-led than a state-run economy, right? So examples of some economies in transition, I wouldn't say China, because China is still very much state-controlled and very much socialist. So examples of economies in transition. There's one that is currently doing very well. Okay, Poland, yes. Any others? Denmark and Indonesia, I wouldn't say so.
Madam, India.
India, are you sure? Was India ever socialist?
No, okay, based on that, yeah, India was never socialist.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see examples of them very soon. But so far, Poland is a very good one. Russia is another very typical example of an economy in transition. Yes, Yao mentioned Russia. Even though they are really struggling with it. Okay, so besides economies in transition, we can also talk about developing economies. Now, these are the countries that typically are burdened with high population growth rates and are often characterized by low per capita GDP. There are high rates of unemployment, and they are very highly dependent on the primary sector. Yes, Marianne, Ghana, a typical example of a developing economy, among other African countries, right? So based on the US classification, they come out with a number of lists, including these various levels of classification based on GDP and GNP computations, as well as the various indices we talked about in the previous slides. So they have this report that they come out with annually, which is called the World Economic Situation and Prospects Report. Now, when you get that report, it tells you annually about the levels of economic development in the countries around the world using the UN's computational strategy, like I just showed you. So I'm going to try and quickly show you this report that I'm talking about before we proceed. Okay. Please, can we see what I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So this is the report. This is the 2020 edition. I'm sure the 2021 edition will come out very soon. So it breaks down using various statistics and the computational methodologies of the United Nations to be able to tell us country classifications based on the different levels of development. And they use various indices. So you realize that they produce different classifications. Here we can see the table for developed economies. Can we see that?
Yes.
Good. Then we go into economies in transition. So we can see all of them here, including Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Northern Macedonia, among others, right? Then they show us the developing economies, and they classify it by region. So you realize that Africa is heavily represented in the developing economies section, as well as a huge chunk of Asia, right? So countries like yes. Malaysia, Thailand, all of them are in the developing economy classification. Even though the king of Thailand is one of the richest people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's just by the way.
It is surprising to see Brunei in there.
Exactly, right? So like I mentioned, depending on the computation and the criteria that they are using, and the international or global agency that is doing it, they explain their methodology and how they come by their figures to include certain countries in certain classifications. So you realize that beyond these, they even have other classifications. For instance, they classify based on fuel exporting countries. So they look at developed fuel exporting countries. Can you see that? Then yes. Economies in transition who are also fuel exporting countries. Then developing countries that are fuel exporting. And Ghana is not here. Where did all our oil go? Okay, that's by the way. So when you get your hands on this report, I'll do my best to share it with you guys so that you can just sit down and peruse it, because they do a lot of breakdown, right? Here now they come into income, and you realize that they even break down and go into the whole HIPIC status, right? So you can see that table F shows us the least developed countries. And then table G shows us the heavily indebted poor countries as of December 2018, right? And that's why Ghana is there. So please don't be alarmed. This is as of December 2018. I think we've been out of HIPIC status for a long time now. So I'll do my best to share this report with you, but this is just to give you an inclination as to the nature of these classifications of which country is developed, which one is developing, which one is least developed, which one is industrialized, which one is newly industrialized, heavily industrialized. Elikem, the title of the report is the World Economic Situation and Prospects Report by the United Nations. So what we just saw was the 2020 edition, which I'm going to share with you after the class. So using the United Nations classification, we are classifying the countries based on developed economies in transition and developing economies, right? So like we saw from the report we just viewed, these are the classifications of countries based on developed economies, developing economies, and economies in transition. And you realize that using the figures and the methodology that they have, they are able to extrapolate and give forecasts, right, of rates of growth in terms of GDP. And once again, this all goes back to their methodology. So when you get the report, you will see the methodology that they use and exactly how they combine the figures to arrive by this outcome of classification. So That is essentially it for the levels of economic development, right? However, when it comes to marketing, there's also another huge concept when we are discussing the economic environment and economic development, which we refer to as the bottom of the pyramid. Please, has anyone heard of the bottom of the pyramid market before? Anyone? You haven't? Okay. So the bottom of the pyramid market was huge back in the early 2000s. It was propounded by one of the fathers of marketing called Prahalad. Now, in his argument, he mentioned that the global economy in terms of income and purchase parity can be designed and explained in the form of a pyramid, where majority of the people are at the base of the pyramid, but they earn the least amount of income. And because they are majority and they are at the base of the pyramid and earn the least amount of income, they are often the least to be considered by global corporations and organizations when they are developing their marketing strategies and tactics. So back in the early 2000s, Prahalad argued that if corporations will look to this huge market at the base of the pyramid and be able to create unique strategies to target them, there is a lot of money to be made if they develop strategies targeted at this bottom of the pyramid. However, Martin Appiah, I just mentioned it's by Prahalad. So Google Prahalad bottom of the pyramid and you will see it. However, in recent times, Prahalad has since died, and there have been several arguments regarding his propositions, right? So more recent literature talks about the new fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, which calls into question some of the propositions that Prahalad made back in 2002. And this states that the original bottom of the pyramid idea of innovating for the poorest at the bottom of the pyramid to be able to tap into that market and earn huge margins is no longer our reality, because the gap between those at the top of the pyramid and the bottom of the pyramid is slowly narrowing, such that between 2002 and now, the gap has narrowed so much. Right? And according to these researchers, in 2017, there were fewer people at the bottom of the pyramid because thanks to technology and advances in technology and the various innovations that were coming up, most of which were being developed at the bottom of the pyramid in these emerging markets, incomes are rising. And because of that, you have more people getting out of the poverty zone to find themselves in higher tiers on the pyramid, thereby reducing the number of consumers at the bottom of the pyramid. So this calls into question Prahalad's initial proposition that there are so many people at the bottom of the pyramid and businesses must target them. The new direction now is that businesses must now look to the future. And the future is about capturing the two types of consumers, not in terms of the level of income and how many they are at what level of the pyramid, but by considering them in terms of the wants and needs that they have in common. Remember yesterday when we were discussing, we talked about globalization and focusing more on the similarities that the consumers across these different markets share in common rather than their differences. So that is what the new fortune at the bottom of the pyramid concept is talking about, that we need to look into consumers' similar wants across these markets that they are considering. So in that case, this pyramid is no longer functional. However, we are looking to a new pyramid, right, which they refer to as the tale of two pyramids, using data from the United Nations and other researchers to propound the idea that annual per capita income is slowly shifting, such that individuals, like we mentioned earlier, are earning more. And the more they earn, the more they exit the bottom of the pyramid into the higher tiers of the pyramid. So you have more people at the top earning more than those at the bottom of the pyramid. So it would not make sense to focus and develop strategies uniquely for those at the pyramid, given that their numbers are shrinking by the day. So it pays more to look across the pyramid and look at the different consumer groups and what they share in common to design products that could serve all these consumers across these groups using the localization mentality of adapting to context when necessary. So that is in general the whole issue with regard to the bottom of the pyramid and where we are now in terms of the new fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Please, does anyone have anything they want to say at this point?
Madam.
Yes, go ahead.
There's another index that they use to measure countries. That's a happiness index.
Okay, good.
Because if you take a nation like Bhutan, they are more concerned about the happiness of their people rather than economic development.
Good. And Finland has been very high on the rankings of the happiness index, haven't they?
Yes, please.
They have, right. So like I mentioned in the beginning, depending on the international agency that you are looking at, or the country or the organization that is doing the classification, they'll use different indices. That is why I was quick to say that we are using the United Nations classification, and that is why their computation is based on the 3 indices that we discussed. So Richard, thank you for sharing with regards to the happiness index.
Yeah, and Doc.
Yeah, Daniel, Tara's hand is up. So can we give her a chance and then you come in? All right.
All right.
Thank you. Tara, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question was about the tale of 2 pyramids.
Yes,
so now that they're considering looking more at the similarities of what the needs of people versus looking at their income buckets.
Yeah.
And I know that the price of a good usually also determines.
Okay, the idea is okay, Tara, before you go ahead, the idea is not about ignoring the income bracket completely.
Okay.
The bottom of the pyramid concept was heavily reliant on income levels.
Okay, so they just reduce the impact of
Good.
Okay.
So what they are saying now is that it shouldn't be so heavily reliant on income levels, but rather on the similarities.
Okay.
Consider income as well, but don't let that be your main focus.
Driver. Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Daniel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam. I think it's just an add up to the previous comment, I think from Richard.
Yes, please.
Yes. So that's more about the concept of human development, where at a point we realize that the fact that the economy is growing, the fact that industries are prospering doesn't necessarily means that it is reflecting in the lives of the people, right? So attention on development shifted from economic development to human development, where people's freedoms and opportunities and their well-beings, are put on a higher pedestal than the economy. Yeah. Because if there's an increase in GDP, if the economy is doing well, it doesn't mean that people are not in poverty. It doesn't mean that people are automatically happy and all that. So yeah. I think it's important that we tune our minds to human development concept as well and look into it as well. Yeah, thank you.
Great. You're welcome, Daniel. Thank you too. Yamesa, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, Doc, but I'm not getting the direction you are going. I'm saying this because it's like I'm looking at China. I'm just looking at I'm staring at China and India. They have a lot of people in the base of the pyramid, and they are doing so well because they develop strategies for those people.
Yeah.
So what are the others saying? I still don't get it. I got your first theory, but I don't get the others. I don't know what they are saying. If you could just sum it up for me to get it. Because
the others in terms of which one? Is it the bottom of the pyramid?
Those who started attacking Prarella.
They are not attacking him.
No, I mean,
they are building upon what he did.
So
they are refining what he did initially, right? Because they were also looking at developments in countries like China and India. And even though they succeeded by developing strategies for those at the pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid, sorry, they realized that people are now pulling themselves out of that below the poverty line, right? Even though we still have a significant number of people in that group. So all they are saying is that companies need to refine their strategies. Organizations need to refine their strategies to look beyond just the numbers and those below the poverty line or in the poverty region, to also look at those who are increasingly pulling themselves out of that zone to join those higher up on the pyramid. Daniel, does that make sense?
More like those who are transitioning from developing to, okay.
Good.
So that means there was a gap.
Group. Good, there was a gap.
Oh, okay. 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 I get you now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Yao. All right. So I guess the hands that are up have, Daniel has spoken, Yao has also spoken. All right. So I guess we can proceed. So these are the two main theories that we are considering in terms of economic development. And I think now we all understand how these theories help us to explain what we are talking about in terms of the issue of economic development. So moving on, let's talk about economic cooperation. Now, economic cooperation contributes a long way towards helping countries to develop their economies, right? And when we talk about economic cooperation, we mentioned a little bit of it yesterday, where we were talking about how countries try to maximize the use of the resources that they have by joining these groups of other countries to be able to benefit from competencies and resources that they themselves do not possess, right? So by engaging in economic cooperation, individual member countries are able to provide large markets, right, for the producers within their countries, as well as be able to benefit from the resources and endowments that other countries possess that they do not, right? So these economic integration efforts, right, by way of cooperation between countries, create what we refer to as trading blocks. And there are several of them around the world that are currently influencing and controlling how trade and by extension marketing is done across countries, right? You realize that some of these trade blocks that we can see all around us occur in different states and levels with different provisions, depending on the level of cooperation between the countries involved and the provisions that they make as part of this cooperation. Now, based on the provisions, we can see that some of these trade blocks have quite ambitious goals. For some of them, it's about political integration, the highest of which we can observe with the European Union, right? While others also have less ambitious goals and tread with a lot of caution in terms of introducing various levels of agreement and understanding among themselves, right? And depending on how well the cooperation goes, once the agreement goes into force, these trade blocks can either experience high levels of success or experience failure, especially where some individual member countries feel that the benefits that are being shared among member countries is being done in an unequal manner. And this is where you realize some individual countries attempting to recluse themselves from these trade blocks that they were hitherto part of. And the most recent example of this we can observe is with the Brexit. That happened when Britain chose to exit from the EU because they realized that they were not receiving any proper benefits from being part of the European Union, right? And today there are still proponents who believe that Britain should have never left the European Union, and others too who are very much in support of Britain's exit from the European Union, right? So on the basis of this, we can see various forms of economic integration, often classified based on how ambitious their goals are and the number of countries that are involved. And depending on the level of ambition and the level of cooperation and agreements that they have, we can also judge the level of restrictiveness of some of these trade blocks, as well as determine how much freedom it gives to member countries to be able to implement their own country level strategies and make their own country level decisions regarding how to engage with international organizations, right? So let's look at the different kinds of economic cooperation. we can put them in the form of a multi-layered circle, right? Kind of like an onion with different layers. Now, at the core, we have the least restrictive of these economic cooperations. And then at the outer circumference, we have the most restrictive, right? So as we move further and further out, we get more and more restrictive in terms of the terms and conditions for member countries of these different levels of economic integration. So we will start from the least restrictive one, which is the free trade area, right? And the free trade area basically allows member countries to trade among themselves freely by removing all barriers to trade. However, they get to maintain their own individual tariffs and barriers to trade against outsider countries who are not members of the free trade area. So examples of the free trade area that we can see currently around us include NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Area that involves the US, Canada, and Mexico. Then more recently, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is headquartered in Ghana, right? So as of February 5th, 2021, a total of 36 African Union member states had ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area, even though 54 out of the 55 countries had signed on to be part of the free trade area. So even though it is in force, a specific number of countries are still yet to ratify it for it to take effect in their countries and in terms of trade between their countries and other signatories to the AFCFTA, right? However, trading has commenced. As of 1st January 2021, trading had commenced in the AFCFTA, right? And this is heavily supported by other economic corporations, including the European Union, which gave a total of over 72 million euros to support the AFCFTA. And I remember in the previous discussion we had in one of my classes, the students were very skeptical regarding the involvement of the EU in the AFCFTA and why they would give such a huge amount of money in support of the AFCFTA. But that is a discussion for another day. Yao Mensah says he doesn't trust the EU. I think certain members of this class also share similar sentiments, right? So currently the AFCFTA, I can say, is the freshest free trade area that we can observe, and it is happening in our own backyard. There are several documents and reports that have been written regarding the AFCFTA and its prospects, including one by the World Bank, which I will share with you if you are interested. So after the class, if you are interested in that report, let me know. I'll share it with you as well so that you can read and see what the World Bank's projections are regarding this particular free trade area and how it will benefit member countries, right? So that is it with the free trade area. Now, beyond the free trade area, the next level of restrictiveness, which takes us to the next kind of economic integration, is the customs union. Now here, the objective of the customs union is to harmonize trade regulations among themselves and to also establish common barriers against outsiders. So whereas with the free trade area, they have common barriers among themselves that are free to set their own tariffs and barriers for outsiders. With the customs union, they have common barriers and regulations among themselves, and they also have common regulations against outsider countries who are not part of the customs union, right? So the world's oldest customs union is the Benelux Customs Union, which was set up in September 1944, involving Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and it's still in operation to date. And then the most recent one we can observe is between Turkey and the European Union, which took effect on this 31st December 1995. And this is the closest that Turkey could come to having some kind of economic cooperation with the EU, because for the longest time, Turkey has wanted to be part of the European Union. And despite being one of the #1 import and export partners of the EU, Turkey has still not received the green light from the European Union to become full members, right? Which is something they desire very much to date. So till they are granted that permission, they have to make do with the customs union agreement between them. And they do a lot of trade back and forth between Turkey and the EU. And they have several agreements on other issues, including currently the EU is helping Turkey to be able to deal with the huge influx of refugees from the Syrian war, based on how much refugees they are getting and how it is affecting the economic situation in Turkey, right? So that is it for customs union, which is the next level of economic integration or cooperation after the free trade area. Elizabeth, please come in.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening, Elizabeth.
Please, I want to know the common barriers. Can I get some examples of some of these common barriers for customs union? I'm seeing tariff here, but I don't know.
Remember, we talked about different kinds of tariffs. We talked about tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers.
Non-tariff, yes.
Good.
Yes.
And we had different examples. So they can decide to pick on any of the examples we talked about in our previous lecture and decide that, okay, these are the kinds of barriers we are implementing with these countries, depending on the product or service that they are importing or exporting. And then for the non-tariff,
so it means that they are eliminating those barriers, or especially between
they eliminate a lot of the barriers among themselves.
Okay.
And then they create new ones for outsiders.
Good. Okay.
And these ones that are created against outsiders is usually to protect the member countries.
The members. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. All right. So that is it for the customs union, right? Now, beyond the customs union, the next level of economic integration, right, which is also higher up on the scale of restrictiveness, is the common market. Now, with the common market, countries remove all customs and other restrictions on the movement of the factors of production. So factors of production here include services, raw materials, labor among the member countries, right? And then they go a step further to standardize their business and labor laws so that there will be no form of unfair competition. Because you realize with the free trade area and the common and the customs union, even though barriers are eliminated, right, and they have common barriers against foreign countries, they do not have standardized business and labor laws within their respective countries. So this could create some level of unfair competition among the member countries, even though they have common external tariffs and common internal regulations. So the common market goes a step further to harmonize business and labor laws to be able to ensure that there is fairness in terms of competition among the member countries. So examples of the common market include the European Economic Area, right, which is between the European Free Trade Association and the European Union. And you realize that a lot of members of the European Free Trade Association are the ones that did not agree to switch their currency to the euro, right? Including Liechtenstein, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and Iceland, right? Austria and Finland use the euro. Okay, so that is it for the common market. Then we can talk about the economic union or the monetary union, which is the next level in terms of restrictiveness and economic integration, and currently the highest level of economic integration that we can observe in existence. Now, this requires the integration of economic policies in addition to the free movement of goods, services, and factors of production, as well as the harmonization of the business laws and the labor laws, right? They also harmonize taxation and government spending, as well as other monetary policies. All of these are characteristic of an economic union, in addition to a common currency, which in the case of the European Union is the euro, right? So depending on the level of integration that a country has with any of these unions and other countries, there are certain guidelines that apply to them and other guidelines that do not. So for instance, following a transition period, several European countries who were part of the EU agreed to transition to use a common European currency, right? However, some other countries that were not interested in going to that level of integration to harmonize their currency chose not to change their currency, however, maintained other terms of their agreement or integration with the European Union. These include the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, Iceland, and Sweden, among others, right? And currently, the United Kingdom has decided that even the other terms of the agreement are no longer favorable to them in terms of that integration that they have. So they decided to pull out completely. So that is it for economic union, also known as monetary union, which is the most restrictive and the highest form of economic integration that we can observe in practice to date, right? So yes, Tara, please go ahead.
Okay, so my question is that, is it common to find that in some of these, within some of these unions or integrations, they allow you the flexibility to pick and choose which aspects of the agreement you would want to adhere to? I would think that especially with this being the strictest or the most restrictive type of integration, they would have been more strict in terms of you can pick and choose what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
Or is there a balance? They say, okay, we have 15 policies that you have to stick to, but you need to agree to a minimum of 12. Is it common that they have agreements like that, or it's
not very common, but agreements like that exist. And I wouldn't call it a matter of deciding a certain number that should have this, certain number that should have that. I would say it boils down to leverage.
Okay.
So depending on the leverage that you have as a country, as an economy, what key resources you have, how powerful you are. Remember, some of these countries control a huge amount of resources and have huge levels of influence and control and belong to certain kinds of cooperations and agreements, right? That make them very powerful.
Okay.
And therefore, they have certain leverage when it comes to negotiating and making these agreements. Okay. Remember when the UK decided to exit the EU? You remember how long it took for them to actually come to an agreement on the terms of their exit?
I think it was about 2 years or 3 years, if not.
Good, because the UK had a lot of leverage. The EU also had some amount of leverage, and they had to come to an agreement, which was so difficult to do. Right, that ultimately each person had to compromise, each group had to compromise, and they had to part ways, some benefiting in one way, others losing in the other, right? So I think it boils down to leverage.
Leverage, okay.
But there are other member countries of the EU who do not have a say. They are so small and their influence is so limited that they just take what they are given.
And I'm sure that when they look at the benefits of being a part of the union, it just makes more sense for them to ignore whatever grievances they may have and join.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome, Tara, and thank you. Priscilla, please go ahead.
Yes, Doc. Would you say that the economic union has all aspects of like the custom union and then the common market and then the free trade area all embedded in one?
Yes.
Or it's got some aspects and not everything?
All embedded in one, but like we just discussed in terms of Tara's question, the agreements could differ depending on the country they are dealing with, the leverage that the country has, and the kind of negotiation that has gone on. So a country with high leverage like the UK until their most recent exit, or a country like Norway could decide that, okay, we are okay with the free trade terms, or we are not okay with the customs union terms. We are okay if we have common external tariffs, but we will not be okay if you try to harmonize your business, the business laws and the labor laws across the EU with that of our country. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
So you will observe all the different levels in practice, but they are applied differently depending on the country you are dealing with and what negotiation they came up with to become part of that union.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Priscilla. All right. So in terms of economic cooperation, these are the different levels of economic cooperation that we can have, right? ranging from the economic union being the most restrictive to the free trade area being the least restrictive. Now, what are the implication of this economic cooperation for marketers? Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Yes, please. We've actually talked about AFTA and then the EU and all that, but I'm not hearing ECOWAS. What is happening to ECOWAS?
ECOWAS is also one of the forms of economic cooperation, but the AFCFTA is currently the poster child. ECOWAS, people were so excited, especially when they began talks about introducing the ECO. But since the talks about introducing the ECO stalled, people realized that the economic community of West African states was not as solid and united as we presumed it was. So people are still coming to grasp with the cracks in that system. And then the AFCFTA was thrown at us from the AU level. So currently that's what everyone is excited about. And ECOWAS is just quiet in the background.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. So what are we saying are the implications for global marketing in terms of the economic environment and all we've discussed? We need to understand that the competitive environment is changing drastically and has been changing over time, particularly because of the levels of economic integration that is happening and the different agreements that are being made across board, across countries in different contexts. So we as global marketers may need to rethink our strategies in terms of marketing, finance, distribution, and production, among others, right? And because of the rate at which these levels of economic integration is being done, and the different agreements that are being signed on a daily basis, the different understandings that are being created, we need to be able to understand all the different aspects of these regulations and what they mean for us as businesses and our operations across borders in these different contexts, depending on the country that you are trying to enter into and the unions that they belong to, so that you'll be able to plan your business activities, know what you can take full advantage of, and know what you need to protect yourself from in terms of threats, right? So I remember last year we had the head of the Ghana Export Promotion Agency here talking to us, and she was lamenting the fact that Ghanaian businesses, especially those who want to go into export, are not taking full advantage of all the opportunities that Ghana has as a result of the different economic corporations that Ghana belongs to, right? And according to her, with the introduction of the AFCFTA, there are even more benefits that Ghanaian businesses stand to gain. However, until we take the step to gain this knowledge and understand these regulations and agreements and what they mean for our businesses, there is no way we will be able to take advantage of them. So we need to start getting abreast of all these developments and the provisions in these developments and what they mean for us as businesses, particularly in terms of global marketing across borders. So that is it for the economic environment. Next, we can talk about the political environment. And here, when we talk about the political environment, it's pretty straightforward. We are referring to all the issues that have to do with the political situation, both domestically, in foreign markets, and internationally, and how all these interact with each other, bearing in mind the complex nature of the political environment and how different powers and players and the decisions that they make impact firms and corporations in the different countries across the globe. So as an organization, when investing in a foreign country, you need to first of all think about the political and legal concerns in that particular market or context. Because if you are not fully aware of the political system and the implications of this system to your business, you may end up falling into a trap, or you may end up not being able to take full advantage of systems that could perhaps benefit your business and help it to grow and succeed. So it is not just about taking a one-off look at the political situation and making a decision. Because of the erratic nature of the political environment, particularly in contexts like Africa, as an organization, you need to create a system that helps you to continually and systematically monitor and evaluate the political situation in different countries, particularly those ones you are interested in operating in or the ones you are currently still operating in, to be able to help you to understand the terrain in those environments and how to be able to adjust yourself through adaptation or some form of skillful control to ensure that where there are significant risks, you take the necessary steps to neutralize them. And where there are benefits to be had, you can take the necessary steps to make full advantage of them, right? For instance, in the Ghanaian environment, when we talk about doing business in Ghana, are we aware that there are certain businesses that foreign or foreign institutions or foreigners are not allowed to engage in Ghana? Are we aware?
Very much aware.
Good. What are some of them? Retail.
I think foreigners are not supposed to do retail.
Yeah, so you can't do petty trading. You can't go and get a stall in the market and start selling. It's reserved for the local people. Any other one?
Sorry, Doc, isn't MaxMart and Koala, are they all not retail outlets, and are they not owned by foreigners, or those are nationalized foreigners?
They are not doing petty trading.
Okay, so it's just the petty trading aspect.
Good.
Okay.
Right. What else? What else?
Galamsey.
Yes, Galamsey. Interesting. But on a more serious note, what else? In fact, when this spate of betting in Ghana started, I was very concerned. I was like, why? How did it happen? Then I went to read the law and I realized that there's a reason why there are so many betting companies now. What do they usually allow the bettors to bet on?
Soccer, football.
Exactly, because according to Ghanaian law, all aspects of betting business and lotteries are supposed to be operated by indigenes, except for football. When I realized that that's what the law said, I was like, okay, that's why they are all just doing football betting. And they're all over the place, because that's what the law allows them to do. Right? Another interesting one that I found out. Do you know foreigners are not allowed to engage in the supply and retail of sachet water?
Never knew that.
Okay, that's a fun fact. A fun fact. So sachet water is reserved for Ghanaians alone. So please feel free to set up one in your.
But the bottled could be done by other foreigners.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay.
But the sachet is reserved for the local people. That is why when you see the Baltic in the sachet water, it's not for Baltic Ghana. Have you seen the Baltic sachet water before?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
it's not for Baltic.
It's not for Baltic.
It's for a local indigenous.
I think it's franchise or something.
No, it's for a local company.
It's for a local company. They just decided to make the name. Baltic has nothing to do with it.
So, Doc, let me ask this question.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a big time deception.
It is.
No, it's not for Baltic. It's been going on for a long time. It's not for Baltic.
That's a big time deception.
Okay, so Doc, my question is, doesn't the law just give isn't it hinged on the quantum of money that you need as a foreigner to set up a business? So even if your business is to produce rubber for sachet producers and you meet the minimum quota, isn't that the gap in the law?
That is it. So that is why we are saying that it is important for you to understand the law in terms of the political and legal system and monitor it. Because lawyers are good at finding gray areas. But until you engage their services, that's why you realize that a lot of these multinational organizations and corporations have whole legal departments. It's not for fancy or for show or for litigation. It's for purposes such as this. Because they need people to be on the job around the clock, monitoring these systems, monitoring the changes, so that the company does not fall into something without having foreknowledge of what they are getting into.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So like we were saying, the political environment is very important. And if you are not monitoring changes in the environment and what is permissible and what is not, you may end up falling into trouble. depending on the nature of government policy or the political situation in a particular environment, which can affect your ability to operate effectively and profitably, right? So a lot of key things that you need to monitor, which can significantly affect your business, apart from the laws that we have just talked about, which we will go into briefly in the next segment, include taxation as well. Taxation law is very tricky, depending on the country that you are in. And you need to be able to understand the laws of taxation in every jurisdiction and how it applies to your business to be able to operate effectively. You also need to be able to understand the law as it pertains to the seizure of assets, which a lot of organizations have suffered in the past. We can talk about everything from confiscation, right? Which involves the government actually being able to seize your property as a form of punishment, or in the name of enforcing the law, or expropriation, right? Where they take over your property with or without your permission. Now, in recent times, expropriation and confiscation are relatively rare. However, nationalization and domestication are very much in practice. When we talk about nationalization, we are talking about basically where government takes over privately controlled companies, right? In an effort to control the assets or the level of dominance in a particular sector. And this is a typical example of what is happening in the telecom industry, where government tried to control MTN's growth and somewhat was not able to achieve their aim and has now decided to nationalize Airtel Tigo. Please, am I making sense?
Perfectly.
Yes, please. Yes.
Right? So that's a typical example of nationalization because they want to assert their dominance in that sector. We can also talk about domestication, which has been in force in Ghana for a very long time, where in certain organizations and industries, they ask for a certain amount of control to be in the hands of locals. So a certain percentage of your board have to be Ghanaian. A certain percentage of your shares or stock have to be owned by Ghanaians. That is a typical manifestation of domestication, right? So you need to know the laws of the country as they apply to these, as well as issues of terrorism and kidnapping, which could destroy the foundations of your business. And this we have seen happening rampantly in one of the West African countries, which is posing a lot of concern to foreigners and is making them second guess their investment decisions in that country. Please, which country am I talking about?
Nigeria.
Nigeria, right? Barbara, you're right, Nigeria. And it's still a very serious problem, which they have not even come close to solving. So these are all political risks that you need to consider in terms of global marketing and setting up shop in different markets across the globe, right? So what are we saying? For global marketing, the implications of the political environment include being able to make sure that whatever activity you are engaging in is stimulating the local economy. That will make you less prone to all these different types of seizure of assets and application of law enforcement in these different jurisdictions, right? You should also think about employing a number of nationals in your company, depending on the rules, to ensure that you do not flout the laws with regard to domestication, depending on the sector that you are involved in and the country you are operating in. This also applies to sharing ownership in the event that a certain percentage of ownership has to be concentrated among the locals. And another important thing too that you need to be able to do as an astute business person in global marketing is to be able to lobby. Lobbying and negotiation is an art that you need to learn if you want to do business and do it across borders. So these are the implications of global marketing with regard to the political environment. Yeah, Mensa, your hand is up. Is it
Doc,
yeah.
No, I just have a question for behind the scenes lobbying.
Yes.
Which is a huge thing in my industry.
Mm-hmm. Please, which is your industry?
Doc, please hold on. I beg you.
Just share the industry. We don't know your company.
It's like you don't remember or you don't want to say.
Maybe intelligence. Okay. Business intelligence. Okay. Please
no. I'm in the extractive industry.
Okay, now it makes sense. Yes.
We have a very rigid local content law.
Yes.
I'm asking, this is my question. You're working for a multinational that has got a seemingly tight, watertight code of conduct and ethics policy.
Yep.
And we are in an environment where behind the scenes lobbying is the only way to get into the market. So you have a clash of these two. But from what you are saying, the multinational should have known the terrain that in the extractive industry in West Africa, there is a very rigid behind the scenes lobbying regime that you have to go through.
That's
true. So why are we having this clash? Where you are going for endless meetings and trainings on code and ethics, but then that is not how the market really is. Are they not sending their legal teams out to study the market? That's my question.
This one is beyond me.
Oh, sorry.
This one is beyond me because technically there are so many variables at play. Perhaps this lobbying is being done to be able to get a foot in the door. But once they have their foot in the door, how they survive is up to them. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Sorry, but no.
It doesn't. Okay. So what I'm saying is, there's this phrase that you can be all things to some people. I don't know. I've forgotten the exact phrasing of it, but each company is supposed to have their own code of ethics, their own laws, and how they operate. But if you want to be able to move into a foreign market, there's jurisdiction that you need to respect. And that is what we are talking about when we refer to this political legal environment thing. So regardless of what their code of ethics is, once they make the decision to enter a particular market, it is no longer about their code of ethics, but it's about the jurisdiction they are trying to enter into and what they have to do to get into that jurisdiction. Yeah, does this one make sense?
Yes, Liz, this one.
So it's up to them to decide, based on our code of ethics, are the requirements of this jurisdiction something that we can be able to accept or we can bear just to make it into the market? Or is something that we cannot compromise our ethics or beliefs or whatever for, so we would rather not venture at all? Yeah, does this one too make sense?
On paper, yes.
Good. So it's about finding out what did they have to compromise, and whatever they compromised, was it against their ethics? If it was against their ethics, why did they choose to do so?
Okay.
Yes, Mami Esi, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. Sorry, I have to take you back to the economic environment.
Okay.
Please, talking about finance strategies that allows us to take full advantage in global marketing.
Yes.
Please, what are some of the finance strategies we can use?
Finance strategies?
Yeah, you were in the economic, one of the slides said that to take full advantage of the business in the international field, you have to have good finance strategies, distribution strategies, and marketing strategies. So talking about finance.
Yeah, you know, each of those are formulated in terms of the level of development. And when it comes to finance, they consider a lot of indices. We can talk about inflation, we can talk about the borrowing rates being the base rate, among others, right? I'm not a finance professional, so I can't go into specifics. However, when it comes to finance, depending on the economic situation, there are certain economic indicators you need to look at to determine how you go about your business, including the rate at which you borrow, how much you invest into the business in the economy at that point in time. Amiesia, are you with me?
Yes, no.
Good. So for the specific indices and indicators, we will have to consult the financial people. I don't know if you did you do financial management as part of your courses?
I think we are now doing it.
Good. So that is where these things will come up, right? But those decisions are made specifically looking at it from the area of finance, in terms of the indices that determine the economic situation and what it means for your business and how much you are investing.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Amiezi. All right, so in the chat, I'm seeing discussions about does lobbying involve money and bribery? It depends on the circumstances within which the money exchanges hands and in what terms. So, but from what I've heard, some lobbying involves some financial commitment Sometimes it does not exchange hands among individuals. Sometimes it involves financial commitment to certain things, including certain projects. So it's not black or white, but depending on the circumstances under which the money exchange hands, it could be termed bribery or otherwise. So Dave and Co, please, that's my 2 cents. Linda, please go ahead.
Yes, Doc, thank you. Because Yao Mensah said it's usually just on paper, but when it comes to practicality, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I beg to have a different view.
Yeah.
There's one company that I worked for that tried to venture into business in Nigeria.
Yes, please.
Now, in that company, the company policy and the code of ethics, anything termed as lobbying is seen as bribery.
Great.
Regardless how beautiful you want to package it.
Great.
So when the company attempted to do business in Nigeria, and the MD there had to be sending regular reports, we need money for this to lobby here, the company came to a conclusion that no, we have to fold up. And up until now, that company is not working in Nigeria. And I don't think they would ever go back to work in Nigeria. So it is not always on paper. There's some companies that are very stringent when it comes to these regulations or their internal policies. And for that matter, they would not cower or probably bow to any of these things. So some companies are very strict on it. Yes,
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing. Jemima, please go ahead. Jemima, are you there? Okay.
Yes,
all right.
I'm here.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes.
I was going to ask. Yeah, I was going to ask that you tell me the difference between bidding and lobbying. And the lady who just left just mentioned why they wouldn't lobby, why the company she worked for, why they will not lobby, because it's against their ethics. Okay, now if all organizations will say that it's against their ethics and for the whole thing, I stand to be corrected, but when you look at the whole thing, it's like the huge sums of money that you will use in lobbying can do the business to enable you to make profit. Now, if these people are taking all these
Jemima, are you there?
How do you start business? Definitely, it's good enough to start the business. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, please go ahead. We couldn't hear you.
Okay, all I'm saying is I wanted to know the difference between bidding and lobbying.
Yeah. Okay.
And also to say that if you have to lobby, the amount of money that you will invest in the lobbying can do the business from scratch.
Yeah.
But when they take that huge sum of money from you because you have to lobby to get your business in existence, then you might as well fold up, because it won't end there. They will keep coming.
Yeah. Okay, so with regards to the lobbying part, Linda's hand is up, so I'll allow her to come in on that one. But in terms of the difference between the bidding and the lobbying, I think bidding usually occurs in a more confined and transparent manner, such that there are terms and rules and regulations that you have to follow throughout the bidding process. So it's more transparent, and there are laid down rules that people follow. And once someone emerges the victor or emerges successful, you can tell how the person emerged. Unlike lobbying, that is not so much transparent and has a lot of hidden undertones, right? Linda, please come in.
I want to add that perhaps Jemima should also add facilitation, because over time the terminologies are changing. Now, a lot of companies, instead of saying lobbying, are using facilitation. And for some of these organizations that I have worked with, the word lobbying doesn't fly. So maybe if you use facilitation or another synonym, then that might work for you. But usually I think that, lobbying is becoming archaic. So maybe we should find other synonyms to replace that. Well, facilitation is working within the company I currently work with. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Jemima should ask that as well.
Good one
there, it's because I heard the word lobbying while she was lecturing. That's why I wanted to know the difference between lobbying and
Dave says we can also add appreciation fee to it. He has added appreciation in the chat.
Please, I think I agree with Linda too, because in most books now, we actually say facilitated payments. That is how we call it.
Yeah.
Yes, to actually frame the whole thing.
So Linda says all die, we die.
It covers all
of them
around it. Okay, thank you.
So put lobbying into brackets, facilitation / appreciation, right?
By all means.
Okay. All right, Juliet, has your question been answered? So we can. Yes.
It's not a question.
Okay.
I just want to use with the lobbying aspect.
Yes.
Whether appreciation or painting with painting. It is lobbying.
Okay, some people Dave said it's also called solidarity.
But the thing about I wanted to comment on what Jemima said.
Yes, please.
That the monies that you use in lobbying, it's equal to what you can start the business with, so it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Most of the times, it's not so.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, you are bidding for a contract worth maybe $500 million.
Yeah.
Or whatever. You are not going to spend more than 500 million. Definitely, whoever is going to fund it will definitely want a cut, because they know that after whatever, you get more from the market.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not wrong, even though
so you're saying generally it's about what is at stake for the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. All right, Julia, thank you so much. So the legal environment is directly related to the political environment, as we just talked about. The political environment, to a large extent, determines the nature of the legal system, right? And the rules that apply in terms of licensing, trademarks, patents, what you have to do in terms of lobbying, facilitation, bribery, dispute resolution. All of these things are determined by the law. So as an organization, it helps to have an astute and proactive legal department, right? That is going to be on top of the legal issues. And there's not just any legal counsel. You need expert legal counsel that are well versed in issues of international trade, so that they can be able to advise you accordingly when it comes to decisions of this nature and how best to proceed to achieve the best outcomes. Because if you go into these environments without having a firm grasp of the political and legal environment, you're basically a sitting duck and anything can happen to your organization, right? So moving on, we can talk about the socio-cultural environment. Now, this is a very fun part of global marketing, because it has to do with how businesses interact with consumers within the different markets. Now, when we talk about the socio-cultural environment, culture is the key word here. That refers to the learned ways in which the people in the different societies you want to operate in understand, make decisions, and communicate, right? So based on the definition alone, we can see that observing at a glance across the world, there are so many ways in which people understand things, how they communicate, how they relate to each other, their norms, their values, what is deemed acceptable and what is not. And this creates a huge amount of differentiation across the various markets all over the world that firms operate in. So we need to be able to understand the cultural orientations of these different markets in the socio-cultural sense, to be able to appreciate how to do business in these environments with various organizations as well as consumers in these markets. Now, one theory that we use to try to understand the issue of socio-cultural issues in regards to global marketing, or the issue of the socio-cultural environment, is with Hall 1960s low context, high context culture classification. So high context cultures are basically those cultures that use and interpret more of the elements surrounding a message, making their level of communication and how they go about it very complex. Whereas low context cultures rely mainly on spoken and written language, right, to be able to create meaning. So for instance, if you are dealing with someone in a low context culture, there are different aspects of their communication that will be more straightforward and to the point than if you were dealing with someone in a high context culture. And based on the graph that we can see in front of us, we can be able to see the level of implicitness with regard to messages as we get into higher levels of contextualization for different cultures. And you can see different countries placed along the continuum, such that countries like Switzerland are very low in terms of context when it comes to their communication. And countries like the Arabs and the Japanese are very high in terms of contextualization, such that if you were doing business in a high context environment, like with the Arabs and Japanese, when you are communicating, they look more at the implicit aspects of the communication. So you may be using a particular word or a particular gesture, but it will not be taken explicitly in the sense of using it, but they will interpret it in terms of their implicit understanding and what they believe is behind the use of that word or gesture, right? And we can be able to grade low context and high context cultures along a continuum using different characteristics. For instance, when we talk about low context cultures, their beliefs and attitudes are usually egalitarian because they believe in equity and equality among all people. However, in high context cultures, they revere and respect authority a lot. So things would usually proceed in the form of hierarchy, from the most authoritative and most revered and respected, and then down to the least respected and least influential, right? And this is a direct implication on another aspect of cultural conceptualization, which is referred to as Hofstede's cultural dimensions, which also talks about high power distance and low power distance, which breaks down the differences between low context and high context cultures, where with high power distance cultures, we see more of this hierarchical concept I'm talking about, from the highest in authority to the least in authority. And then for the low power distance cultures, we see more of the low context communication taking place, right? Where they are more of equals. And there's no great disparity between the wealthy and the poor, or the most powerful and the least powerful, right? Yeah, your hand is up.
This is the reason why I asked my initial question about code of conduct and stuff. The guys who draft the code of conduct are from a low context environment, and they want it to apply in a high context environment.
Yeah, good point. So this is where your knowledge in this field comes in, because you need to be able to try and use the facts and the concepts and the theories and the research to let them understand about these contextual differences and how they affect how you do business. Otherwise, they'll keep hitting roadblocks and they will not be able to take a firm stance. So like Linda was saying, if they believe that what is being required is beyond what is acceptable to them, they may decide not to go into that market at all. And if they believe it is doable within the confines of what they believe is acceptable, then they may decide to venture forth. But it all boils down to what they choose to do and what is acceptable to them based on their code of ethics or code of conduct, if you may. Right? So yeah, I think this course is timely for you.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
You're welcome, yeah. All right, so as you can see, there are different characteristics along which we can contextualize low context and high context cultures. There's so many of them. I think in your spare time, when you receive the slides, you can go through them and see how all these different things play out depending on the culture that you are dealing with. But this, to a large extent, will determine how you even relate to your business partners in these contexts and how you sell to customers within these contexts, because their actions will be largely determined by the level of contextualization that they bring to the communication and interaction with people from other contexts or countries that they want to do business with. Now, beyond Hall's contextualization, we can also talk about cultural differentiators, which are largely hinged upon Hofstede's cultural dimensions, right? Now, Hofstede's cultural dimensions initially were 5. However, recently, based on research, a gap was identified which introduced a 6th dimension of the cultural classification, which is referred to as indulgence and restraint. So in total, we have 6, starting from power distance to uncertainty avoidance, individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, time orientation, and then indulgence/restraint. So we'll take each of these and then we'll look at the global marketing implications, right? starting from power distance. So for power distance, we observe that it refers to the degree of inequality between people. And this can be in terms of physical or educational terms, or in terms of power and wealth. Now, in high power distance societies like Japan and North Korea, these differences or inequalities in terms of power and wealth are readily acceptable. So it's okay for someone to be extremely rich, someone to be extremely poor, and the other one to be the other one's servant, and so on and so forth. However, in low power distance societies like Finland and Denmark, you realize that they believe that everyone is equal and deserves to have equal rights and opportunities. And this translates into how they relate to each other, even across genders. So you realize that in high power distance contexts where women are seen as less powerful than men, in context of low power distance like Denmark and Finland, the women and the men are at par, right? So what does this mean for global marketing? It means that when you are selling in such markets, you need to be cognizant that decisions are often made by the heads of families or top managers, or those at the top of the hierarchy in high power distance countries. And therefore, they are the people you should target in terms of your marketing. Whereas in low power distance countries, you need to be able to emphasize in terms of your marketing how your product or service or whatever you are selling will benefit generally everyone in the populace and make their lives better and contribute to enhancing equality and consensus among all the people concerned, right? So that is it in terms of power distance. Now, talking about uncertainty avoidance, here we are talking about the degree to which people in these different contexts feel threatened, right? And want to avoid ambiguous situations as well as taking risks. So when we talk about how high uncertainty avoidance cultures like Japan, and I think Ghana here, we are also very high uncertainty avoidance, we are very averse to taking risk. Whereas in low uncertainty avoidance countries like the United States and Canada, risk taking comes very easy to them, right? And with low uncertainty avoidance context, because risk taking comes easily to them, they are very free and outgoing when it comes to trying new things. And this applies to trying new products and venturing into new business areas as well. So people from such contexts are not afraid to look into new phenomena. So as a brand venturing into a market, if there's low uncertainty avoidance, it means you have a high chance of getting people to come on board with the new product or service that you're trying to introduce. Versus a high uncertainty avoidance country where you will have to do more to convince the people of the authenticity of what you are offering and then the low amount of risk that this new thing you are introducing to them brings, right? So in that case, what does it mean for global marketing? Cultures with a high uncertainty avoidance need to have product characteristics spelled out clearly to them in terms of the product features, how it will benefit them, what is good about it, and how it is going to make their lives better. Whereas with low uncertainty avoidance, you don't have to do much to convince them, right? So you can generally market to them based on implied benefits or references to positive change without making categorical promises, and they are most likely not to make a big deal out of it because they tend to be relaxed in terms of their expectations when it comes to consumption experiences. Nigel says, what does GH fall with respect to uncertainty avoidance? I think we are high uncertainty avoidance. Yes, Juliet, I agree with you. I think we are high uncertainty avoidance. Yeah. So that is it with regard to uncertainty avoidance. Then we can also talk about individualism and collectivism. And this one denotes the degree to which people in a country learn and act as individuals rather than as members of a group. And here we can clearly see that Ghana falls within the group of the collectivist cultures, right? So for collectivist cultures, they have more of a group mentality. The approval and the influence of the family and the friends and the social groups to which they belong is very strong, such that they would want to seek the approval of the collective to be able to make certain decisions. Whereas in individualistic societies, they make more immediate decisions on their own because they do not rely and depend so much on others for their approval, right? So when it comes to global marketing activities and the implications of individualism and collectivism on this, we need to appreciate the fact that when it comes to marketing in individualistic cultures, we need to consider pushing more of individual benefits, how our product or service is going to contribute towards their individual freedom, save them time, contribute towards them rewarding themselves and becoming more effective and better versions of themselves. Whereas for low individualism context, it's about being able to market to the whole community and being able to push the agenda of value and emphasizing how your product or service is going to bring members of the community closer together, right? And this is often seen in how organizations market products in low individualistic cultures like Ghana. You realize that they offer a lot of value products that are meant to be consumed and shared in a collective, because this is welcomed and more appreciated in cultures of this nature, rather than in individualistic cultures where they favor more of an individual approach and an independent-minded approach to consumption situations, right? Now, moving on to masculinity and femininity, we can talk about the degree to which a culture exhibits more masculine values as against feminine values, right? So in cultures where they have a masculine orientation, it's all about masculine values like performance, success, competition, right? The prevalence of achievement overall else. And in Africa, we have several of such cultures, including which one? There's a very popular one in West Africa. Which one is that?
Nigeria.
Nigeria, right? They are very highly masculine culture, and it shows in everything that they do, as against the feminine cultures who value more of quality of life, maintaining personal relationships, caring for the needy, the weak, and the vulnerable in society. And I think we can say Ghana is more of a feminine culture, right? So here, when we are dealing with, Dave says the typical Ghanaian will build 7-bedroom house because it can house his in-laws and friends. But American will build a single room or 2-bedroom house for himself and his kids. Exactly, Dave. Very good example. So for masculine cultures, they usually exhibit different roles for men and women, right? And these are highly emphasized. Whereas in feminine cultures, they stress quality of life, right? They are not very materialistic. They are more of collectivists, right? In their thoughts and their actions. So markets with low masculinity promote sexual equality. Men and women should be treated with some level in a similar manner, right? Each person should be treated with respect, right? And for these highly masculine markets, the focus is on selling to the male's ego, focus on achievement, focus on competition. So designing adverts for such a context will involve building a concept around achievement and success and performance and wealth, which is what is appreciated in the society. Whereas in feminine societies, it's all about pushing the collectivist agenda and care for society, care for the vulnerable, and care for the weak, right? Okay, and that is it for the masculine and feminine cultures. Now for the long-term, short-term orientation, basically have to do with how the people think. For long-term oriented cultures, they are focused more on thinking about the future and what the future holds and preparing for the future, right? So you realize that they think more about persistence and being thrift towards conserving resources for the future rather than short-term rewards for themselves. That is why pushing an agenda in a country like Ghana, which is long-term oriented, where you are trying to push the agenda of people buying very expensive designer, very luxury items to use on themselves, may not fly, because they would think first about the future and the implications of spending huge amounts of money on themselves in the short term, on the future that they are trying to build perhaps for their children and their generations unborn, right? Whereas in short-term orientation, it's all about quick results and short-term fulfillment and short-term happiness. So if they have made a huge amount of money, they wouldn't mind spending a lot of that money right now for gratification and making themselves happy, because that is the kind of orientation that their culture has. So in terms of global marketing implications, we are saying that international marketers have to take these orientations into account when designing promotions. For a long-term orientation culture, you are supposed to push the agenda of how your product or service is going to help them and secure them for the future, how it's going to make their life in future better and prepare them for unforeseen events. Whereas for short-term orientation, it's about pushing the agenda of short-term benefits, short-term gratification, short-term happiness, right? And that is with regard to the long-term, short-term orientation cultures. Then we can talk about the indulgence and restraint cultures. Now, this dimension has to do with the extent with which people try to control their impulses and desires, right? And this is largely dependent upon how they were raised or socialized. So people who were raised and socialized in indulgence context have relatively weak control, whereas those brought up in restrained cultures have relatively strong control, right? So when we look at indulgence cultures like the USA and Latvia, they allow relatively free gratification based on their natural human drives. They are more about having fun and enjoying life and living for the moment. And this is usually expressed in the form of a short-term orientation, where they are thinking about short-term gratification, how they can benefit and make themselves happy now. Whereas restrained cultures are more long-term oriented, like North Korea and the United Arab Emirates, where they suppress gratification of their needs and they regulate the activities of their citizenry using strict social norms and rules, right, to be able to ensure that they get them to behave in a particular restrained manner. So in terms of indulgence and self-restrained cultures, what does it mean for marketing? You realize that with indulgent cultures, they have very lax values when it comes to leisure, sports, and sexual standards, right? So if you are doing an advert in an indulgent culture like the USA, and you are showing semi-nude females, excuse me to say, or people engaging in the fast life, or having fun, or enjoying leisure, it is acceptable. Whereas in a restrained culture, such concepts will not be accepted. You cannot go and put nudity on display. You cannot go and do sexually suggestive adverts and try to promote leisure and self-indulgence, right? It's more about promoting socially accepted values and norms, right? So in your marketing to people or individuals in these contexts, you need to take into consideration the level of restraint or indulgence that is exhibited in the culture. And we realize that in the Arab states, particularly in the Middle East, they are all very, very restrained. And this drives the activities of organizations that are operating in these contexts. Marianne says, Linda said, polo, yes, you see, so that means that Ghana is trying to send a message of the restrained nature of our culture, right? So what are we saying? If we look at these different cultural orientations, it opens our eyes to the fact that we should not underestimate any culture, because in any given context, there are different cultures and subcultures that are at play. And these can have a direct influence on how we do our business. And it also sensitizes us to the fact that we should not go the ethnocentric approach and assume that our culture is superior to that of others. We need to always have a polycentric or geocentric ideology and deal with contexts as they come, with their specific contextual issues, so that we can build our marketing strategies around the values and practices and situation within these individual contexts to ensure that we maximize our chances of success in these environments. Because without understanding how things work in these environments, we will basically be blind people that can walk into any situation in terms of business that could either make or break our business operations. And we do not want that. So in terms of strategy, we need to take cognizance of all these different contextual issues in the global marketing environment to be able to ensure that we have made adequate provision to take advantage of all the opportunities we can find therein and protect ourselves against any threats that may creep up, that may affect our business operations in international markets. And with that, we've come to the end of our session for today.